Hey, BassGeek here, and today we continue our ledge bait breakdown series, but today I'm going to show you the progression of baits I use when I'm first going out finding those deep ledge bass. So let me set up the situation for you guys. You can see on the sonar as I'm talking to you, there's a creek channel ledge right here, a point that drops down to a flat that drops down to a creek channel ledge, and those bass love to get right out here and sit up on the lip and down in that creek channel as an ambush place as shad or other bait fish come across that point. So what I want to show you is the progression of baits generally I go to when I find fish like this. Now, there's not a lot of fish out there. This lake really isn't quite ready to be fished, you know, on the ledges yet. So what I want to do is show you the setup and show you the progression of baits that I'm going to go through. The very first thing I'm going to pick up and I'm going to have in my hand is some variation of the Patriot Minnow. Now, I'll have some, you know, if the water's really clear out here today, right now with the sun, it's probably 10 feet and getting cleaner. So I'm going to go with my Go Shad color. I'm going to put it on a 1/2 ounce. Now, if you're out on the Tennessee River, if you're out on those places that are pulling a lot of current, you're going to want to run that up to a 3/4 or even an ounce to keep it down. As always, you know, my BB1 Pro, guys, and this, I'm telling you, this rod, the Ledge Series swim bait rod, this is probably the best swim bait rod and best investment I've ever made. This rod and this reel will cast this bait a country mile. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up to this ledge and I'm going to make me a long cast. And I'm going to make sure that I'm in a position to where I'm casting up and over that ledge to start with. You know, I may come up on top of the ledge and cast the other direction, but I know the current flow is this way, and I know these bass position themselves to feed this direction. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my rod tip, and I'm going to let this rod, or I'm going to let this bait sink to the bottom. And I'm going to reel it very, very slowly because I know I'm coming down that ledge. And again, I've got a 6, 5 to 1 BB Pro. So I'm going to reel this bait very, very slowly. I'm going to keep my rod tip pointed out in front of me, and I'm just going to make some fan casts. And that's going to be my primary search bait, to be honest with you. Now, what's going to cause me to progress through, say, to bait number 2? So bait number 2 for me really is a bait that if I'm getting bites on this size, the 5-inch or a 6-inch, if you're throwing, you know, something else, a Bastrix, I think it's, I don't even remember what the zooms are, but if I'm throwing this bait and I start getting hit, but for whatever reason I'm not getting takers, well, that's why I pick up bait number 2. So the second bait I'm going to, like I said, it's going to be if I'm getting some, you know, some pecks, some hits on that bigger bait, and I'm going to go to 2 different sizes. My go-to size tends to be the 3.5-inch Patriot Minnow, and I'll throw it on a 1/2 ounce head. This is a ledge head, of course. Of course, it's a ledge head on my 5-inch Patriot Minnow because I want to get it down there. Now, again, you may have to go with a bigger head if you're in current, a lot of current. But generally, again, with the smaller bait, it's going to get down there. Now, when you put an underspin on, the thing about an underspin is you want to go a little heavier than you normally would. Even though we've got a smaller bait, that blade is going to give us more lift. So always remember, vibration, more lift. So if you've got a blade of any sort or a lip of any sort, unless you're on a crankbait, I'm talking about swim baits, you're going to get more lift. So you need more weight to counteract that. More plastic, the bigger the bait, the more weight, all right, to keep that bait down there where you want it. And again, it's really going to be the same thing. I'm, you know, again, got my BB1 Pro, my speed spool. You guys know I love them. We're going to make a long cast. And even with the underspin, the first cast is always going to be letting it go to the bottom. As soon as it hits the bottom, I'm going to give it a little tug with the rod tip, get that blade moving, and we're just going to work it real slow down that point and across that ledge. Now, like I said, there'll be two different types, two different sizes. I'll put a, you know, 3/4 head, a lot of times 3/4 ounce, 1.25 ounces on the 5-inch bait. Now, if I think I'm around bigger fish, if I think it's not that I've got small fish that are pecking at this bait, then I'm going to go with the 5-inch bait. I'm going to go with the bigger underspin because I'm going to target big fish. But if I think I'm out here and I'm on a school of small fish, if I'm on a school of small fish, or I think it's smaller fish, I'm going to pick up this smaller bait. Now, it may also be that they're just keyed in on smaller, you know, smaller bait fish. So if you get out there and you throw that big one a couple times and you notice that the bait fish that are jumping around are smaller, go with the smaller profile bait. And the other thing is, you know, this wire, what I like about this wire is most of the time I'll take and bend that wire straight down so that it looks like two bait fish swimming together. Let's say we're on them, we've caught one or two, we know we got a good school. We want to catch a few more, but they're not hitting the moving baits anymore. Or we've located this school, they're really tight to the bottom. They're not up off the bottom. I mean, they're snug to the bottom. That's when I'm going to start looking at my bottom dragging baits, and that's going to bring us to bait number 3. Now the next one, we're going to bounce back and forth between the jig and the wobble head. If I'm really having to cover some water, I'm going to go with that wobble head. That's kind of going to replace my jig. It's going to replace, you know, a couple of baits. I can move it a lot faster if I feel like the bass are, you know, still pretty active. If I've caught one or two off my swim bait and I want to see if I can maybe get a bigger bite, that jig is going to come into play. But if I'm just trying to get them fired up still, that wobble head. Now, most of the time, to be honest, I'm going to have that jig tied on. And it's going to be the same exact thing, guys. We're going to cast it out. We're going to let it sink to the bottom. And the very first retrieve I'm generally going to start with is going to be the good old drag and hop. And what I mean by that is I'm going to let it sink. I'm going to reel down. Always with a jig, I like to keep my rod straight out, reel that slack up, and I'm just going to barely drag it. Barely drag it. I'll reel that slack back in. And then on the second one, I might just give it a couple of just little hops. And really, when I'm hopping it, I'm just bouncing that slack. So it's not moving the jig a whole lot, just barely moving it. Just hopping it up kind of like a crawfish would. Then I'm just going to drag it some more, feeling what's down there. Let it set for a second. Just give it a few little bitty hops. I'm not moving my rod tip hardly any when I do that. Again, depending on how big the school is, you know, what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and get me some references, some waypoints out here on where they are. And I'm going to pick me a little area once I get my waypoint set up, or even my buoys, and I'm going to fan cast that area. I'm not going to make more really than 3-4 casts, 4-5 casts tops with each bait, and it's really going to have to be a good school for me to spend that much time on them. So last but not least, generally I'm going to go with a shaky head, a Magnum shaky head. But this bait really has been doing such a great job lately, and you can fish it a little bit faster. You can hop it, you know, you got that great, you know, wacky rig sort of deal going on with it, so you don't have to just drag it on the bottom. Now, if I think they're on the bottom and I think they're really inactive, I'm gonna put it on a big head, big jig, but I'm gonna throw the big worm. I'm gonna throw the big worm on that shaky head style, that Magnum shaky head. And basically we've got the same thing. We're gonna make a long cast. We're gonna let this bait sink down. Once it's on bottom, we're just gonna reel up. We're just gonna drag it. We're just gonna drag this bait. This bait is, this and the shaky head are they are inactive. This is the last chance. A lot of guys will go to a Carolina rig after this. Me, I'm going to the next spot. And like I said, a lot of times, just dragging that bait, and then every once in a while, I'll just shake that slack. Shake that slack. That's going to really get that tail. All right, so we pull up to a school. We made 10, 15, 20 casts at it. We didn't even get a nibble on those swim baits. A lot of times I'm not going to slow down and stop. I might get to that jig. If we don't get a nibble there, we're probably jetting. Now, all that being said, we get a couple of nibbles, we catch a few fish. We're trying to figure out what this school is all about. We're going to sit here and we're going to progress through these baits. If we know a little something about the school, we'll progress through these baits. But if I'm out here just trying to figure out what they're doing, I'm not going to spend that much time. Like I said, we're going to make 3-4 casts maximum with each bait. They're going to be very targeted. That's the key. You know, you're not covering bank, you're fishing, you're targeting these fish. So whatever you have to do, again, go watch my ledge playlist. There's a great video about using buoys in there. And that's really it, guys. Don't spend a lot of time on that particular school. If you find them, mark them. I tell people this all the time when I take them out with me. Some days this school just won't fire, so don't waste your time. And you may miss it. They may fire for 15 or 20 minutes one day, and that is it. So you want to find a group of schools, and you want to create that milk run most of the time. So keep watching. We're going to show you a lot of other baits that I use out on the ledges. You know, I'm showing you all these baits not because I use every single one every single day. You know, you got to let your gut speak to you, and you got to test these baits out when you're out there. You know, you're not getting bit on the things you like to throw. That's the great thing about ledge fishing. A lot of times you get to pick what you want to get bit on. But if you're not getting bit on those, you got some alternatives, and that's why I'm doing this series for you. All right, guys, like always, questions and comments in the comment section below. If you got any questions about this, about ledge fishing, hey, about fishing shallow in the summer, go ahead and ask them. Like it if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe, and you guys rock.